Ladies and gentlemen, we might have to have a conversation about Sixers culture. We got the news that Caleb Martin reportedly rejected a 5-year, $65 million offer from the Heat a week ago just to sign with the Sixers for a 4-year, $32 million deal. Now, he does have a player option at the tail end of this contract, but I do think this is really telling of what Martin's priorities are. And to call a spade here, the Sixers just straight up have a better chance at winning a championship than the Miami Heat. Now, I know they do have that devil magic working down there in Miami, the Heat culture that they have built up, but the reality is Caleb Martin was a huge part of all of that. When you think about the identity, the way that they played, these are all characteristics that we want coming to Philadelphia, and I am confident that he will be bringing them with him. But I do know there is this weirdness, this kind of speculation or concern when picking up Heat role players, is once again that devil magic does seem to be working down there, but Martin is a guy that is a straight up very good basketball player that I do believe will translate to the major extent. Now, there has been some talk about where Caleb Martin fits in on this Sixers team, though we do know the Sixers are truly leaning into this positionless brand of basketball where it will be Tyrese Maxey, it will be Joel Embiid, and then in between that, it's some sort of Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, and Paul George at whatever position you were to declare each of them. And I particularly believe this to be the case from the Woj article itself, who talked about when making this announcement, gave the idea for what specifically he does bring to the table. And Woj writes that free agent forward Caleb Martin has agreed to a 4-year deal guaranteed for more than $32 million with the Philadelphia 76ers, sources told ESPN on Saturday. The 76ers landed an impactful commitment from Martin, a playoff-tested power forward and versatile defender who joins Philadelphia after 3 seasons with the Miami Heat. Martin is expected, my fault here, to pull it back up here. Martin is expected to become the Sixers starting power forward, sliding to a front court that now includes All-NBA forward Paul George and MVP center Joel Embiid. He joins a free agent class that includes George, Eric Gordon, and Andre Drummond. So a lot to break down there from Woj, but I do want to talk about the positional aspect of things as it pertains to Martin, to take a look at what position he particularly played, this dating to his time with both Charlotte and the Miami Heat here. So as you can see early on in his career, playing 5% point guard, 73% shooting guard, and 23% small forward as a rookie. That gradually evolved to where he played 4% of his minutes at power forward in his sophomore season. At his most back in the 21-22 season with Miami, where he spent 22% of his minutes, primarily a small forward, 58% of his minutes there, and most recently this season with the Heat, played 11% of his minutes at point guard, 66% of his minutes at shooting guard, 23% of his minutes at small forward, and just 1% at power forward there. But I will note that in the playoffs, 12% of his minutes were technically logged at the power forward position. But I also just want to put that to the side for the point that who cares about positions anymore is really the way that I'm looking at it. Now, I'm in agreement. The Sixers could absolutely still bring in a guy, could use to bring in a guy that is a high-level rebounder that could play next to Joel Embiid, a Bobby Portis type player that I think would be a huge weapon on this team. But I think there will be rosters and lineups and matchups that Caleb Martin will be the answer there. And another note to bring is when you're kind of projecting things you're talking about, like for both the true point guard conversation and the true power forward conversation, they're kind of a dying breed. Like if you want to go roster to roster around the NBA, there truly aren't very many guys that are real deal power forwards. Like even if you want to look at, say, the Boston Celtics, who is their power forward? Probably either Al Horford or Kristaps Porzingis. You could even make the case Jason Tatum logging a significant amount of minutes there. And even a team like the New York Knicks, it's going to be very positionless. I would probably guess that either Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby is technically going to be their power forward in crunch time there. My point being that there aren't that many teams that play this stringent positional basketball at this point in time. And I like that the Sixers are leaning into that I think there's more value in doing that at this point in time in a roster catered around Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, and of course, Paul George. Now, when bringing up Caleb Martin, he's an absolute gamer. He's a dude that is at his best when the lights are the brightest. And to touch on his stats here, they do not shine as much as they probably should. This season, his best statistical season at 10 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 2.2 assists, but the shooting numbers not quite what I expected them to be or what I really think replicate him as a player. He shot 43.1% from the floor this season, from beyond the three-point arc, 34.9%. Through his career, he is a 35.7% shooter on 3 attempts per game. He did shoot over 40% in his first season with the Miami Heat, and as I mentioned, he is a playoff riser. And to kind of touch on that, let's take a look at his numbers against the Boston Celtics, with which Woj added in the initial tweet there, saying that in the past 2 seasons, Martin averaged 13.6 points, 50% shooting, and 44% on his three-pointers versus the Celtics, including the regular season and playoffs. That's his most points per game versus an Eastern Conference opponent in that span. He is a Celtics killer, and that is exactly what the Sixers should be signing up to get. Now, another point about Martin and kind of how the money has tied out, that I've seen some level of concern, which is absolutely fair, about the concept of the Sixers tying up so many assets to these three superstars. That being Tyrese Maxey, who officially signed his max contract with a beautiful tribute from the Sixers organization. We'll be talking more about that in a future video as well. Joel Embiid, who's obviously not reigning, but a former MVP and a guy who's currently suiting up with the Olympics and representing the United States there. And then Paul George, as he came this offseason. But when you look beyond that, Daryl Morey did a really good job of building up this roster. And to truly put that into perspective, shout out to Romp here, who writes, last season, Tobias Harris making $39 million. For reference, this season, Caleb Martin, $7.1 million. Kelly Oubre, $8.0 million. And Andre Drummond at $4.8 million. So for half the price of Tobias Harris, they added 3 players that will all make a notable impact this year. That's really good work around the margins and something that we should tip the cap to Daryl Morey there. Now, when speaking about this Sixers team, I do think, obviously, there is that level of talent with Joel Embiid, with Tyrese Maxey, and with Paul George. But I think there's a real world where Caleb Martin has arguably more of an impact, and certainly I think captures the hearts of fans a little bit more. Maybe not than all of these guys, but for sure like Paul George to an extent here. And when thinking about matching up with these Eastern Conference teams, this brand of positionless, versatile basketball, you got to lean into to answer them. But I feel pretty good about the trio of Kelly Oubre, Paul George, and Caleb Martin being the guys to have to match up with the Jason Tatums, the Jaylen Browns, the Derek Whites, all those type of guys, or even on the Knicks with OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, who we know how much switchability, versatility, and the level of athleticism that have blown past the Sixers in past years. This is a trio here. This is a group of perimeter defenders that I think raised the floor of the Sixers in a major way. And I still want to circle back to the fact that Caleb Martin is buying into this, that he very easily could have stayed in Miami, played a part in that team that still will, of course, be in the playoff picture, still has Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, added Khalil Ware, a couple other players that they are still going to be relevant and around. But I like that he came to Philadelphia. I like that he's taken on this new challenge, and I do think he's going to be fully embraced as a result of it. And again, these Sixers need that type of playoff experience, that we do know the shortcomings that have come from the Joel Embiid era, that Tyrese Maxey still very young, that Paul George, a seasoned experience, but not a guy that has quite got over the edge, that we've seen Caleb Martin perform at his best when the lights are the brightest, in the postseason, in the NBA Finals. He's been a guy who's looked Giannis in the eye and shot a three-pointer off him and then let him know all about it. He's done the same thing against Jason Tatum, against Jaylen Brown, and he brings this level of nastiness that I think is straight up necessary on this Sixers team. For the same reason, when talking about these 3 stars, the Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, all of them are kind of just nice guys who play good basketball. But beyond that, you need some guys to set the tone. And I do think Embiid has a little more nastiness in him than the other two. As much as I love Maxey, and he shows his competitive flashes. There's no doubt about it. I'm not saying he's not a guy that wants to compete by any means. But when I'm talking about like getting under an opponent's skin and making sure you're in their head, all those type of things, Caleb Martin and Kelly Oubre are about as good as it comes with that. And even Paul George has recognized that it's such, calling out Kelly Oubre for it on his recent podcast, basically saying how much it feels like we always end up going chest to chest and get in each other's faces when we play, but it is at the end of the day a respect, and those are the type of guys that you want to go to battle with. So I do think the Sixers are embracing that and leaning into that I think we've tried these talent techniques. We've seen them go with the you bring in Al Horford and take him away from the Celtics, or how talented a guy like Ben Simmons is or James Harden. It's worth trying to make it work. This team fits. For the first time in the Joel Embiid era, it feels like there really was a sit back, analyze, and how do you optimize Joel and build a team around him. And that is really thrilling stuff. So there's still a lot to be done. There's still many more moves to be taken care of on this roster. They still got to round it out with the number of veterans. Again, I would like a power forward option for certain matchups for help on the boards with that regard. But I'm really intrigued by what Caleb Martin brings, and I'm blown away that he did actually come to Philadelphia. That for me, it felt like a foregone conclusion that this guy was going to stay in Miami. But the fact that he did have the desire to come to Philadelphia for less money, to me, says a lot about the direction the Sixers are going, the respect that all these players have gained around the league, and what their goal is for this season. So Caleb Martin, welcome to Philadelphia. I hope that it has everything that you hope it to be, and you have as much influence on this Sixers team as I believe to be the case. But let me know if you guys agree in the comments. How do you feel about that starting five? Do you have any concerns about the rebounding issues there and anything else that is on your mind there? Also, make sure you're dropping a like on this video if you have not, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. We're going to be ripping out Sixers news on the regular every day right here on Sixers Digest. So make sure you're ringing that bell and keep up to date with all of it. I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.